Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. I'm not going to say thank God it's Monday because Monday is the worst day of the week.
Is it? I don't think it is.
Well, I don't know. A lot of people do think that. I don't because it's like just one day in 7. But I know a lot of people in Buffalo are waking up with hangovers this morning because Sunday was the St. Patty's Day parade, and I did not participate because it's just drunk. And now it's drunken debauchery down there.
It's always been.
No.
Listen, hold on. My dad tells a story. My dad is 90 years old, was on St. Patrick's Day. His name is Danny. He is well aware of St. Patrick's Day, except he's just not Irish.
No, I'm talking about in Buffalo,
well,
Russ.
In New York, which isn't that far from Buffalo.
Yeah.
He talked about times where he would go to work on that day, and on the Long Island Railroad at 5:30 in the morning, people would have beer in their already in the paper bags, getting ready. 3-4 hours of drinking before that parade would ever get started.
Oh, I saw people 7 o'clock at night after the parade walking around.
So what am I surprised at? Come on.
Yeah, but no, there's one. It used to be more family friendly. Now there's one parade in South Buffalo that's the family friendly one.
Okay.
This one is the one where they're throwing beer cans at the floats.
Right.
So okay, start us off with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
All right. So clearly, we could chat about the World Baseball Classic since we have Kevin here and what he thinks about it. We honestly, Kev, we talked about it, about the fact that it should be after the season, and literally that day, Edwin Diaz goes down. 6 hours later, he goes down. His season's over. The Mets have already lost another reliever, at least probably through the start of opening day from that tournament. We just saw Altuve go out now for a month and change.
8 weeks, actually, 2 months.
2 months.
Yeah.
Broken right thumb. I was just looking.
So we have to wonder at this point. The national pride of this, to me, is a sales job because the money goes to Major League Baseball. This is a Major League Baseball event. You pull the Major League Baseball players out of this event, there is no event. So to me, it's kind of like this is all cash driven anyhow.
No, it is not. It's player driven. Like if you hear any of the South American players in particular, but I heard Mike Trout talking about it as well. These people want to play. Yeah. They like the nationalistic idea about it, but it's at the wrong time. There's always a risk. I mean, in the off season, guys get hurt working out. We see it in hockey. We see it in baseball. The Guardians. I caught myself there. Guardians have a good prospect who was injured working out. We've seen players already end up in surgery from stuff they did in workouts and stuff. So this is going to happen regardless, but it's at the wrong time. Like it's ridiculous that we're preparing for a season and there are players with the dim, but you don't want to get rid of it. It is something the players want. They're into it now. They are making some money from it, I assume.
Oh, there's no question.
Yeah, but I don't. Just because you make money doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I think, whenever you have it's like player driven, like they're excited about it. I think you should figure out a way to do it, just not now.
Well, it's funny because the Edwin Diaz injury. Apparently, and I heard this. Michael Kay reported this that the Major League Baseball is picking up the tab for Diaz's salary for the year, but the Mets, if they want to sign somebody to replace him because they're way over the salary cap, they or way over the luxury tax, they would have to basically pay double for anybody that they sign. So they don't give them cap relief or salary relief. They just give them relief on the actual salary that was paid. Now, I don't wish, my hatred of Altuve and the Astros, but even I wouldn't wish him getting a broken hand or a broken thumb for what happened. I just think this tournament should belong after the baseball season, but the reason that they do it, and I found out this the reason that they do it is because it interferes with players' free agency. They're not under contract at that point, and if they do get hurt, they could lose millions of dollars because they're injured. You know what? Then I'm sorry. If you love it so much, then take that risk because right now all you're doing,
Mike, come on,
it's ridiculous.
No, that isn't ridiculous. Like that makes sense. We see that all the time. with the World Cup as well. When guys don't have a contract, they don't play. I just think, so what? You're going to have to deal with that, and there's not as many guys. Like there'll still be plenty of players that can play in it. If your timing is bad on when your contract is, that's just part and parcel of it. But I would still move it till then. But
I'm not saying cancel it. I just, this time of the year, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, no. I mean, it should be like the World Championship in hockey, where if you're not in the playoffs, then you go play in the World Championships, and it was
a lot more money than the World Cup of hockey. Let's talk about it bad. I mean,
well, yeah, but I mean, gosh, are you against them making money? Like, I don't understand.
No, I'm not against them making money, but what I'm against is they are borrowing against the MLB owners' money to get this tournament going because some of their players want to play it.
Yeah, they do.
The owners of baseball are the ones that end up suffering if their players get hurt. That's what I'm mad at.
Well, but you're always going to have that situation where because you guys can't live in a bubble, and in the old days, in hockey there used to be written in the clause you couldn't ski, you couldn't ride a motorcycle. They had all kinds of things in there in order to do that, but I just think it should be like the World Championships in hockey. Once your season is over, if you want to go play in that, go through it, and it would be similar because. The Europeans are more invested in the World Championships of hockey than the North American players are. And, just where I think North American baseball players aren't as invested, some of them are, but not a lot of them are not, just not interested. But it's huge in South America and in the outside of North America. So I wanted to bring up something too.
Sure.
About this, just because we had talked about, which I thought was kind of coincidental. Joe Yerdon brought up that he wasn't quite as in, and I said, yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I'm not sure why, to the NCAA basketball tournament. But that upset with Fairleigh Dickinson, I mean, that's kind of what sports are all about.
I was watching it too.
It's amazing. And what I really enjoy about that, were the layers to it. First of all, Fairleigh Dickinson shouldn't even have been there. They didn't win their championship, but the team who did win the championship is ineligible because they haven't been Division I long enough. So they got to go to that. Because of that, they were ranked third from the bottom.
Yeah.
Third from the bottom in defense. Okay. They didn't have anybody that was taller than 6'4", something like that. They didn't have any tall guys.
But they're very quick. They're very quick.
Yeah. No, I watched the game. But but the big thing is the coach actually said, and he said, you can go ahead and show this to Purdue. I don't care. But he sort of told his players, I've looked at their video and I think we can beat them. And I think the way we beat them is they can't shoot from the outside. And more importantly, they're fearful of shooting from the outside. And if we just hammer their big guy, they did it. And their gymnasium at Fairleigh Dickinson is like a high school gym, but not even as nice as a high school.
I know they have like the rollout bleachers,
right? Like a 1950s Catholic League gymnasium. It's like unbelievable how
I heard it was more of an it's what they used to call all-purpose rooms, not like
it's just nuts, just absolutely nuts. And I just think this is why you tune in for sports. Everyone who just kind of stumbled into that game ended up have a memory of a lifetime. So
that and the Princeton beating Arizona game, that was a 15 beating it too. Yeah, I mean I was surprised. I checked in more than I thought I was going to, and I actually was watching that game when it happened. But then Saturday and Sunday, it sort of got boring, and Kansas lost and Kentucky lost, and now it's, I don't know. Now I'm back to not having any interest.
My funny memory of it was the Friday night I went to see my parents, like my parents, my wife's parents. I mean, got her presents, tickets to see Springsteen on. So we went to see him on last Friday.
Right.
Last Friday in Philadelphia. And the funny thing about it was an incredible concert, and we don't have to talk about that Frank Springsteen debate anymore. But you guys, there's just nothing. This guy for his age played 28 songs, just like full power after missing 2 concerts because of COVID. It's just this guy's.
He didn't miss them. It was some of the band members.
It was him. It was him and the drummer.
It was him.
Yeah.
Okay, because I heard it wasn't. I heard it was
band members just a couple concerts before that, but it was him and the drummer. This guy just, I mean, I was just knowing what I was like after COVID. This guy's 75 years old, whatever it is. I just was astonished. I mean, 28 songs he played for 3 hours and 15 minutes, and then and just full of energy, and as if it was like just any Springsteen concert I'd ever seen. I didn't even notice that he was older, which is normally when I go to see older people play, you start to really feel it. But I didn't feel it with him, and I'm honest. I mean, I saw Yes, I saw PFC, all these older bands. I feel it. But the funniest thing, actually, why I bring it up now is because I slip out, during one of the songs to run to the restroom or whatever, and there's about 10 guys on the concourse just looking up at the NCAA tournaments. Like there's 10. It's like I'm thinking to myself, these Springsteen tickets, we couldn't afford to go. We just flat out said it. We're not going to this concert tour. We can't do it. So and her parents were nice up for her birthday to get her these tickets, and I'm like, I couldn't imagine like somebody out there paid like $200.
People have their. I had a little TV at a Phil Collins concert while I was watching the Knicks Houston Rockets in 93, 94, and there was a crowd around me. Like Phil Collins was playing, and there was this little crowd around me at the Spectrum, like wanting to see what's going on.
Yeah.
No, that happened. That's your team, though. I had the same experience.
Yeah.
The Flyers Islanders series. The Flyers came back from 3-1 back in the 80s. I forget exactly when it was, but for Game 7, so I was dating my old girlfriend / singer in my band, and we went to see Springsteen that night. For she was a Springsteen fan too. Maybe I have a type, but anyway, she was a Springsteen fan as well. And we went up, and I was in Giant Stadium listening to the Flyers Islanders game on my little thing.
You got to stop dating these Springsteen fans.
I know, but yeah, but that was your own team. It's one thing when you're watching an NCAA tournament. That's just you're obviously just gambling. I mean, to me, that's another level.
Yeah, it is interesting though. We had at Detroit Hockey Now our worst 3 days of the year on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we attribute it to the fact that people were watching. The tournament because there's no other explanation. And I do remember when I was at USA Today, we wouldn't do as well in any other stories other than NCAA tournament stories during when the tournament was going on. So,
all right, okay, here we go, guys. Let's go. Sorry for the longer, just slow show. All right, ready? Here we go. I'm finding the date. I just don't want to screw it up again. All right. Hello, Hockey World. It's Monday, March 20th, 2023.
I'm Michael Agello, and I'm confident that I will be energetic for 3 hours and 15 minutes blogging when I'm 75.
Yeah. I'm Russ Cohen, and my brand new draft list is out at sportsology.com.
Nice.
I'm Kevin Allen, and I held one of my baseball drafts yesterday, and one of the players signed by one of my competitors was in through 2028. And I said, my God, are we going to be doing that then? I'll be 73 years old.
I know.
Just, it's getting out of hand.
Well, you start wondering if you're going to see the end of guys' contracts when they sign them. I don't know. Anyway, and I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that goes every Monday through Friday to bring you in the comings and goings in the hockey world. And not a whole lot of crazy news today. Around things. I did want to get into what I wrote about, which is definitely spurred on a big debate online, which I thought was kind of fun. And if you guys are okay starting with that, we can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we get into the news, and that is, where is the best place for Connor Bedard to play in terms of the NHL?
I know that the Twitter poll has limitations in terms of how many numbers, and that's why you grouped them together. And I can't vote on that on one side because there are teams I think that I don't want to get Connor Bedard included in each of those groups.
Right. Now, from my Twitter poll, since you can only do 4 options, and there's there's at least 6 teams that could legitimately get Connor Bedard, I grouped them into this. I grouped them into Montreal, Chicago, and Philly in one side, being these are 3 established teams versus Columbus, Arizona, Anaheim, or what else? I'm sorry.
Columbus, Arizona, Anaheim,
San Jose, which is also. Basically, what I'm asking in that Twitter poll is: is it better for the NHL as a league for him to go to a powerhouse, or is it better for him to go to a a less established team that can maybe turn that team into a powerhouse? me is a really debatable point in a lot of levels. And when you look back on this, when you look back on the history of the league, the NHL hasn't really gotten lucky with this. Like if you're going to talk about powerhouses, when I think about mega generational superstars, I think Gretzky. Obviously Gretzky. He goes to Edmonton, not a big market. Mario goes to Pittsburgh, not a big market, but a good size.
Pittsburgh for a very long time has been thriving. Yeah,
you're right. I'll call Pittsburgh a good hockey market.
That's just as much of a traditional market as Philadelphia is. 67.
Right. Philly has sports teams going back and hockey teams going back in the 30s.
They do, but it's not like Pittsburgh. Like Pittsburgh is on top of jersey sales. Like USA Today, they were number one in terms of.
Kevin, some of that is like cause and effect here too. Like this is Mario goes there, and before Mario was there, Pittsburgh wasn't exactly like a powerhouse, in the NHL. Like they were a team. They were like where Columbus is now. Like they were basically,
Oh, they were not like Columbus.
Not Columbus now.
No, I mean they were a solid franchise in the 70s with Pierre LaRouche and Ron Stackhouse, and they were decent teams.
But your point is well taken, Eck. What you're saying is they weren't like in the top five, and that's for sure.
But Mario, Jágr, and Crosby, that'll do it. I mean those are three major players. That'll turn a city into a hockey town. Full-fledged hockey town. And then look at the other superstars we've seen drafted.
Well, I mean, you have to say, Eck, that the NHL would have chosen not for Connor McDavid to go to Edmonton.
Right, he would have definitely chosen.
I think that's the point he's making.
Yeah, that's the point I'm making. And so when looking forward, if the NHL was going to Patrick Ewing this, which they have obviously haven't, right? I know you don't know the NBA has either, but that's
frozen envelope.
Hold on, that is baloney about Patrick Ewing.
Okay, all right, just you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying.
It's urban myth. Yeah,
urban myth. If they were to do that, would they rather have him in Philadelphia, Chicago, or Montreal, Kevin, or would they rather have him in the other cities, Anaheim, Arizona?
Yeah, it's a great point.
It's a hard one, right?
Yeah, I think from, the one point that you do have to factor into this, and where, even this goes to Pittsburgh as well, you want them in not just where it's a hockey strong market, but where they have a strong tradition of sports. Like Pittsburgh was already well established because of the Steelers were a huge team, and the Pirates were a huge team. Yeah, so it was really beneficial to go because it grew the hockey, but you also got them in a market where they really appreciated kind of superstars. But I don't know, I feel like he would be lost if he was in Anaheim or Arizona or San Jose. Like he wouldn't get the full value. Where if he went to the Blackhawks, which is a weak team, or the Philadelphia Flyers. I mean, those are really established markets where you're going to get full benefit of his superstardom. So, I mean, they're going to really have to work at it if he ends up in Arizona or Anaheim or even Columbus.
Well, I think the last place that the NHL wants him to go is to a Canadian team. Like if, for example, they didn't want McDavid in Edmonton. I'm sure, Matthews in Toronto. Toronto is a major market. Fine. Montreal, I think he'd be lost in Montreal. I mean, it would help the team. It would help all these teams, but I don't think they want him there. But I would say probably Chicago and Philadelphia. The West Coast thing, you're right, Kev. I mean, if every game is starting at 10 o'clock, then you're not going to be getting. Yeah. And I'll just say, I know by tendency to hyperbole, the worst thing for the NHL would be for him to go to Arizona. That franchise needs to die. It needs to go someplace else, and propping them up with Connor Bedard. We'll keep that franchise alive. It needs to go someplace where
it's going to take more than Connor Bedard to keep that franchise alive.
You worry about too many things, Mike. Honestly, that's not even probably a thought process.
Here's my 2 cents.
Go ahead.
No matter what, Connor Bedard's not going to be lost anywhere because Canada's going to be showing highlights of him every day, every night, always, and so will NHL Network, and so will actually ESPN. They won't be able to help themselves. So I don't think that's an issue. But I do think looking at it from a business standpoint and from all the other things, Chicago is probably the best place because they're hurting in attendance. They've lost their big stars. They will get behind a guy like this. They're an original 6 franchise. You want to market an original six. There's nothing else like it. Montreal's at the top of the attendance already.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I got to disagree with you though, Russ. About like in Canada, that's true. Like Bedard, wherever he plays, his highlights will be everywhere. But in the U.S., it's still a little bit challenging to find NHL highlights unless you go to the NHL Network, and then you're only getting hockey fans.
Yeah.
No, but you know what? I think that used to be the case.
Oh, that is still the case.
No, I
How
don't
many
think-
how many McDavid highlights are we seeing on ESPN?
Yeah.
I think if you go and look, you're seeing more McDavid, more Zegras. You are seeing them. There are people.
Not even close though. Like if you're watching the Sportsnet,
That's great.
no, you're not even close. And the other thing too is you're missing out on the what we'll call the Madison Avenue as well. Like if you're in Anaheim, the big marketing companies aren't going to be as excited as if you were a New York Ranger or you were.
I'm not suggesting he should go there. That's why I said Chicago.
No, but I'm just saying you can't say that it has no impact, because it will have an impact.
What I'm saying is it's not going to have an impact on people being able to follow or see Bedard. It won't.
Well, what I've been surprised at, and I think the American.
Hold on, no, because Kevin's shaking his head.
I am. That's just ludicrous. If you're in a smaller market,
we have ESPN Plus, we have YouTube, we have everything. If you want to follow Connor Bedard as a fan, you will have no problem doing it.
Right, but what he's saying is they're
Russ, we're arguing two different things. You're saying if you're a hockey fan, you're going to see him. I'm saying if you want
non-hockey fans will see him too, though. On ESPN.
No, not nearly as much. When you're watching SportsCenter, and I'm an old guy, so I still watch ESPN. You're lucky if you get, they're doing basketball. They're doing NBA, they're doing baseball, and then we'll get you some hockey because
when they do their top 10 highlights, he will be in there.
Which is the reason why I was skeptical about the NHL going to ESPN, because they're redheaded stepchildren. They're not getting the attention that they should get. Whereas if they were on a different network, they wouldn't get as many views.
Yeah, another debate.
They get first priority.
Yeah.
What's interesting is I kind of fall between Kevin and Russ in this debate. I see what I'm more on. I want to be more on the side of Kevin because what he's saying I agree with. But at the same time, I think Russ, if you change your debate, your position a little bit to be that even if he's in a big market, he's not going to get more highlights on ESPN than he is a small market. I don't think that suddenly the Flyers and the Hawks and Canadians are getting more highlights on ESPN than any of the NHL teams are. Really,
well, I mean, if you're on an East Coast team, you will.
But not a little bit, but so small.
It's not enough. I'm with Heck on that.
Well, the interesting thing is in terms of eyeballs, I've noticed this year, especially with TNT and ESPN in full swing, Toronto has been on TNT and ESPN way more than they've ever been, and the reason is Matthews is an American star. Whereas McDavid and Edmonton have not been on ESPN or TNT as much. I think the American-Canadian dynamic is meaningful.
It is, but it is, and I agree with you. I don't know that that's why Toronto's also just a bigger city than Edmonton. In general, it's also an exciting team. They score tons of goals.
So does Edmonton. McDavid's going to win the Hart.
But people still there's more. It's a northeastern. Toronto is part of that whole world. So the Toronto Maple Leafs, to somebody who doesn't know hockey, I mean, Edmonton Oilers, everyone knows who the Edmonton Oilers are, obviously, because of what happened in the 80s, right? But they're not that's the difference between the Edmonton Oilers and the Winnipeg Jets, for example. But otherwise they'd be the same. I mean, if Gretzky and Messier weren't in Edmonton, Edmonton and Winnipeg would have the same kind of following. But what happens here, is interesting. I think Toronto gets more of that too. But Mike, you made a point earlier that I think is totally wrong based on your own arguments in the past, which is that you say he doesn't make a difference in Montreal, but I mean, we all can agree that Matthews has made a difference in Toronto. So to me,
no.
The NHL wanted Matthews in Toronto.
You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. He's going to make a difference as a player everywhere. He's that much of a talent. What I'm saying is, in terms of these franchises thriving and surviving, Montreal doesn't need Connor Bedard. Chicago right now does. Philadelphia desperately needs a Connor Bedard. Montreal just drafted Slavkovsky. They've got young players, and they're in a city that even if they're a mediocre team, they will thrive. They don't need him.
Yeah, but we're not even talking about that question, are we? I mean,
No.
the question is
For the league.
yeah, for the league. So that's
Yeah,
we're not talking about what a good player is because he'll help all of these players, and everybody needs a contract.
There is an argument to be made that the league is better when Montreal is better. I mean, because they are like the Yankees. To me, they are the team that's won the most times. You know what I mean? So when Montreal Canadiens are terrible.
It's hard to argue against that. I'm not going
to. It is. Although I would say it's not quite the same as it used to be. But I mean, you're right for sure.
To anybody who's like over 30, 40 or somewhere in there, it does matter a lot because like we remember the Montreal Canadiens being such a powerhouse, right? Like we have that concept in there that is. And when a game's on TV now and I say it's Montreal versus somebody else, the best I would always be like if I was a choice between a Montreal game versus somebody else and somebody else versus somebody else, I would tend towards the Montreal game because that was the Montreal Canadiens.
You got to be 40 though to have known them winning a cup, and you got to be in your 60s to have known their glory years.
As I said that, I thought about that, Kevin. You're right. No,
30 years ago.
I know, but there were this is a.
Yeah, even I watched the end of their glory years. I didn't even watch their glory years. I watched that last bit of their glory years.
Even after their glory years, they were good for a while. They were still, and you still right.
That's what I watched their last 7 years of their glory years.
I saw the 76 Canadiens beat the Flyers in the Stanley Cup final. That was like a really strong team, right? But and that team stayed strong for a little bit longer. But didn't have success again for a while. But then and then '93 was such an anomaly. But the whole thing, it's definitely you're right. But I still think it feels like part of the lore. It feels like they are like the Boston Red Sox sucked for a long time, but they were still the Boston Red Sox. Like they were. That to me,
true. Yeah.
Me, the Montreal Canadiens are still the Montreal Canadiens. Like even to people who don't.
Yeah, I mean they're number one in attendance, so clearly that's still true.
We've got two full media outlets covering them all the time. They're a completely different bird than anybody else. But how important is that? I don't know. Is it more important that the Chicago Blackhawks stay good? I mean, the Chicago Blackhawks
because if the Blackhawks bottom out again, that hurts the league. That's why if Bedard goes there, they won't bottom out.
I mean, the chatter is, and we don't know if it's right or not, but there's speculation out there that Jonathan Taves may retire at the end of the year, that he's not going to come back. And obviously, Kane's been traded. So that's an organization that is a complete right now. There's a complete emptiness. And I think the NHL, like you were saying, the point about Montreal, the NHL needs Chicago to be good.
They do.
Yeah. And they need Philly to be good. I've heard people make that argument too. Like, that's another team that's
the problem is there's only one Connor Bedard to go around.
Well, I mean, but that's a different question, and that would be fun to discuss too. Yeah. Like who needs them the most?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go there now
because
I think Chicago needs them the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago. I think you need them the most too.
I would buy that as well.
I'm going to say Montreal needs them the most, and I think that I think they're and I do. I just think they are. Not as far along, and I feel like that there's that they've been. This is the thing, I have like a superstar envy thing going on in my head. You know what I mean? Like because I lived in Philadelphia where they got Mario, and just when Mario was ready to retire, they got Sidney, right? And we got Lindros for a while, and that was cool in Philly, and that was great, But he was kind of short lived. Like it wasn't that long a period of time he was in Philly. But I always wanted to get the superstar, Now Chicago just came out of an era where they had their Mario and Jágr and Kane and Taves. They had that, so you're going to put another one in there. You're just going to keep Chicago going on that path.
And Pittsburgh got Crosby as Lemieux was fading, so that that's what I'm saying. It's like
I could argue Detroit might be better than Chicago because Detroit hasn't had the star yet. They are also in that same level of
but Detroit's not going to be in the lottery.
In the lottery, right? But it's
No, they're going to be in the lottery. Yeah,
they're going to be in the lottery, right?
But they're 3.5%. That's what they're. Yeah,
right. I'll say of the teams on your list, the one that needs them the least might be Anaheim because they've got McTavish and they've got Zegras and they've got a core of young guys. I'm not saying that Bedard would he'd be the best of all of them, and that would definitely help.
I mean, they're a -100. They need him.
Yeah, I'm with Russ on that. I mean, they're up there too because like having a superstar like him, they've never really had that. I mean,
need a new coach, Anaheim. They need a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, but what's Anaheim ever had? Like they had Niedermeyer, but it was later in his career.
Korea and
Getzlaf, but I mean he's
Korea was their big one.
Korea and Solani.
Yeah,
Solani
Korea
was not their own. Korea at least was their big.
Yeah,
one.
but Korea.
Getzlaf, and obviously
Getzlaf wasn't as big as Korea though.
Korea was dynamic, but he still, he wasn't like a super superstar.
No. I mean, but those are not every team gets one. Obviously, I mean,
right? No, that is right.
I'd argue they had Pronger there. That to me was like that was. I mean,
they had him for what, 3 years?
I mean, they've had exceptional players. They just haven't had the
You're right. They haven't had the franchise superstar,
generational player. They haven't.
I mean, again, so if we start breaking down how many generational guys have been drafted, it's not as many as you think.
No. That's another debate that I had with myself this morning. Like, do I put McKinnon in that category?
Yes.
Okay. So I put McKinnon in there. Do I put Matthews in there?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you can.
Well, if are you going to put Sakic in then for Colorado?
Oh, you see, you get to that second level.
Yeah, I mean, there's a point where now we're going to be.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, I mean, you got to put Yzerman in, and if you put Yzerman in, you got to put Sakic in.
Yzerman was franchise.
But you got to put Sakic in if you put Yzerman.
If you're putting McKinnon in, you're putting Yzerman and Sakic in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because they're on that level. But to me, there's Gretzky, Lemieux.
They're on Mount Rushmore. I mean,
but I'm talking about. But where's Bedard? Is Bedard in the Gretzky, Lemieux, Crosby?
He hasn't been an NHL team yet. Let's wait until he does.
That's the question.
Yeah, no, I'm with Mike on that. It's way too early to know.
It's really so. If
I would say he could be better than Crosby, and he could be just under McDavid. I don't think there's anybody that's been drafted or is going to get drafted that's going to be better than McDavid. I don't.
Okay. Or Gretzky, or
Gretzky wasn't drafted.
That's different era. Let's just talk this era.
Okay. Right.
I'm just telling you that he's going to be under McDavid.
That's suddenly another era.
Russ has spoken.
How old are we? How old are we, Russ?
No, it's not that. It's really hard to say.
Yeah, it is. I wouldn't even venture a guess just because as Mike said, let's let the kids play.
So long ago, it's like
Yeah, let's let him.
Kevin's lived through 3 eras.
Yeah.
I
wanted to bring this up because a couple teams that, one I think were lying to themselves that they were in the playoff race, and then the reality set in yesterday when they got destroyed by the Rangers, which was Nashville. But we'll talk about that in a second. The Buffalo Sabres have lost now 9 of their last 11 games. They got destroyed by Dallas 10-4 last week. Now yesterday they got hammered by the Bruins 7-0. And I had somebody send something to me on my Facebook timeline about their goaltending, because I was an advocate of them trying to improve their goaltending at the deadline. And they says, well, they lost 7-0. How can their goaltending, upgrading their goaltending help? And it's like, okay, a goaltender makes one save in one game that gets him a win, and maybe the confidence of this team changes that they're not giving up 10 goals against Dallas or 7 goals against Boston. They chose not to. And I don't understand why the management of this franchise decided that it wasn't. I'm not saying trade first-round picks or trade major prospects, but you had a chance to make the playoffs and you decided not to. And I think after the deadline, these players just were crestfallen, and now they're done. Now they're out of it.
Here's the part that I scratch my head at, and I see that other people covering the team are sort of scratching their head too. I certainly thought they could get a goalie for a 3rd-round pick, but then I thought if they were going to get anything, they should get a defenseman, because their defense is just way too loose. It just is. And they went out and they got an offensive player. And that was the thing.
Jeez.
Happened. Yeah, it looks like you leaped about.
Wow. I did. I made a great save on my computer.
You did.
Saving the beauty.
But they went and, they got Jordan Greenway. They went and got an offensive player with term. I would have gotten a defensive player with term. That would
have cost more.
I know, but the idea was at least I would be helping myself in the future with something that's still a little deficient in my system, where they had plenty of offense. Like, what are you doing?
Russ, they were reportedly in on Chychrun, and based on what Ottawa gave up for Chychrun, I sort of, and now obviously a general manager doesn't know what the other team is going to do.
Right? It's baffling, Mike. I agree with you.
Yeah.
You could have topped that offer. They had the assets to do it. You could have topped that offer, and you would have brought in a player.
Should have done that. They
But you don't know what they were asking for.
It's blind.
I've been impressed with Adams, and I would think that if it was reasonable, he would have done it.
Well, we're just saying we like Adams too, but this is a shortcoming right now. This is his first.
And the goaltending is an issue to be sure, but again, I'll point out what I keep saying, because I've heard that this Reimer stuff wasn't as neat and tidy as everybody said it was.
Right.
Like it wasn't a 3rd round pick for Reimer. Like who was it they were supposed to get that was going to be the big savior? Because I've asked around and everybody kept saying, there really wasn't anybody out there. Like Reimer was there, but it wasn't a 3rd round pick for Reimer.
Well, they were asking for a second, and if that was the case, then if they didn't think that was worthwhile, I mean, maybe the Varlamov was not out there, but there were goaltenders out there, and based on what their goaltending situation.
Again, I've asked around it, and no one's come up with a name for me.
That's the same thing with me, and one's even Reimer. Like you can sit there and say, regardless of what's happened recently with Reimer, you can sit back and say that is he that big of an upgrade actually?
Well, look at the amount of goals they've been giving up, though. Like they gave up 5 against the Flyers. They gave up 10 against Dallas.
Yeah, but here's what I think's happening. Here's what I think's happening there. They are doing what the classic young team does, which is when you suddenly realize you can't make the playoffs, you lose your energy.
Well,
so that's more of our point. If you'd have brought in a goalie that can occasionally make the right save,
right,
it wouldn't all be like slumping at this moment.
Yeah, but just tell me who the goalie is. I just want to know who the goalie is. Like, give me one guy that they.
Well, I mean, Reimer was the guy.
Let's just say Reimer wasn't.
But Reimer, I'm told it was not a easy acquisition.
Right.
So,
but even if it wasn't easy, they're loaded. They're loaded with picks. They're loaded with prospects.
What if it was a 1st round pick, Russ? What if it was a 1st round pick?
They weren't asking a first.
No, they weren't asking.
No, I don't think they were, but I thought they were asking for a prospect.
Right.
Yeah, there was a particular prospect.
Who they wanted, that was the problem.
They
could probably held on to a particular prospect.
Buffalo could afford that, and now they have sort of stalled their development where they could have at least. It doesn't matter if they get killed in the 1st round. Just the fact that they'd be in the playoff race for the whole time, the fan base would get excited. You'd sell more season tickets. It's all over. You don't get a chance at that.
You could make an argument that the most valuable player on the Buffalo Sabres this year is not Rasmus Dahlin. It's not Dylan Cousins. It may be Matthias Samuelsson. Because early in the year, they lost 8 games in a row with Matthias Samuelsson out of the lineup, and now they've lost 9 of the last 7 with him out of the lineup for most of those games because he's the defensive guy who allows Dahlin to jump into the offensive attack, and when he's not there, they have to resort to other people.
It is always interesting when you hear those kind of statistics. Like I heard one about Hershier and the Devils the same way. Like when Hershier's in the lineup, they've only lost 5 times all year. It's crazy. It's just like and you think okay, they have obviously they have their other stars there, but he has been that important to them, which is really
I've been a little fascinated, and Mike can speak to this much better than I can, and maybe I just saw it on a bad day, but I've always had this admiration for Buffalo fans, like in terms of television ratings, when you have like obviously the Buffalo Sabres have not been in the final, and yet Buffalo is always like number 2 in terms of cities. Right. The teams that are in the finals, their cities are represented, and then it's Buffalo. Like they're big time hockey fans there. They know the game. They stick with their team. They get depressed about it and they get a little angry, but they're really good fans. And yet on one day when I was looking, it was in the middle. Well, actually, it was after the last loss. I was on Twitter and I just couldn't believe people were calling for Adams to be fired. They want to get rid of Granato, and that just like these fans, it seems like they know better. Like those people know what they're doing.
I think the fact that this team was close, was in the playoff race, and people, a lot of people don't understand. They've missed the playoffs for 12 years. The last time they made the playoffs was 2011. And just for optics' sake, they needed – now, the Greenway deal was a good deal, and I think he's going to help them down the line. But I think and I'm not saying sell major assets. I think they needed to press to get somebody to help them out and to say to the fan base, we're trying to make the playoffs. And the way that the organization addressed this was, well, we're getting there, but we're not close. And fans didn't want to hear that. I think that, you're going to see down now in the last 7 or 8 games that they have home games the rest of the season. I think you're going to see a lot of empty seats. The only thing I think will bring them in is if Devin Levi plays his first NHL game in Buffalo, because a lot of people are excited about that. And Russ, the thing I think we're concerned about is them putting in a kid who is not ready for the NHL in the NHL, and they're talking about him staying with the team the rest of the season and not playing in Rochester. Now, that may have been negotiated, but I don't think that's the right thing. I mean, I think he needs to play.
Is he going to play with the Sabres?
He's going to burn the first year.
You don't know how much.
Yeah.
It seems like they're valuing whatever his time is going to be with Craig Anderson more than playing in Rochester. And that's kind of like a shot at Rochester a little bit, too.
It's also a compliment to Craig Anderson, too.
Is Rochester going to be in the playoffs?
They're borderline. I think they're fourth in the in that north.
So right now, fourth is pretty like you're in there, but you're not in.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if they'll send him down though for the playoffs.
They're saying he's going to stay with the Sabres the rest of the season, and the NHL season ends about the same time that the AHL season does. So that means that he's not going to play, and I don't think they're going to insert him in playoff games. So it sounds like
unless he's been playing well at the NHL level,
right?
I mean, Sabres fans need to check out Hank Balling's article on HockeyBuzz right now. It's really good, by the way. And Mike agrees with most of what you're saying, but it is really good. Besides that point, and it says it's it's written by Hank Balling. You got to check it out because he really gets into it, and it's titled "Oh No, We Suck Again," which is really funny, but true. Like from a Sabres perspective, he really nails it down on the defenseman, the kind of defenseman they should have got, Mike. Why they need to get that kind of defenseman, like you're saying. Why they need to get an experienced goalie. He says the two goalies they have now should compete for one job next year.
The backup.
Right, the backup, and the other should be relegated to the ECHL, he said, which is intense.
Well, I mean, Eric Comrie was clearly a mistake. Craig Anderson is probably going to be their goaltender coach if he retired.
Right. So he says Luukkonen and Comrie should compete for the backup spot next year. They should be.
And they should go out and get an established goaltender. You can't. I mean, I think Levi should play.
I think they will.
Yeah, I think Levi should play a full year in Rochester.
He's the NHL goalie. So then he says, but you still need a goalie at the NHL level
and Luukkonen could be the backup for a goaltender that they trade for. They need
right. So he agrees with everything you're saying. I do think that it looks worse. When you have like a must-win game last night. Like last night was a must-win game, and then they lose 7-0. Like
all I think is great minds think alike.
Yeah. Well, he's a great writer. I check out Hank. We're gonna have to have him on the air to talk about it too because he's really top notch. But
now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was Nashville, because Nashville, after the deadline, and they emptied the coffers. I mean, they traded a few players, and everybody thought that was basically it. And they, were surviving and winning with Saros playing well here or there, and then they get hammered 7-0 by the Rangers. And I just think that, not to say a team's not going to stop trying, but really, like the fact that they were in the race was a miracle, and now I think the miracle is over with.
Yeah, I give him a lot of credit for hanging in there, and then Yossi got hurt, and when I saw Yossi got hurt, I thought they're in too deep. Yeah, they were kind of doing it. Mike's right; they were kind of doing it with mirrors.
Now that was a confluence of they were bound to come down and Rangers were bound to come up. Like there was a point in which
the Rangers weren't going to keep losing. They're better.
Rangers were going to get it together at some point and start connecting all this talent exactly.
Now, Kev, am I wrong in saying that the NHL is probably on bended knee praying that the Seattle Kraken make the playoffs? Because right now they're in the first wild card, 83 points. They're 6 points ahead of Calgary. I think they want this team as in their second year to make the postseason.
Yeah, it's not something that they have meetings about or anything, but I'm you're probably right in the back of their mind thinking, you want to help this expansion team along in terms of solidifying its place, in the community. And, we know what excitement is when you make the playoffs for the first time. The Nashville Predators, kind of turned it into an art form, and everybody that's sort of new to the playoffs kind of adds another layer to it. You can look at, what Nashville has done. And, for those who haven't been there, they get sledgehammers out and they beat the hell out of a car in front of the arena.
I have a video of my wife doing that. Yep.
Yeah. And there's
Vancouver in 2011. Didn't they?
Yeah. And Vegas, of course, just puts on a Vegas show before the game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. So, what will Seattle do? Like, who knows what they do? So it would be, good for them to get in. And, you give Seattle credit because I think we all agreed they did a terrible job.
We did. We all went down on them.
Yeah, and they just didn't do it, and yet here they are, doing their
like
thing.
They're not going to make it.
Yeah, but Beniers has been a big part of that, though.
He's been great. He's been great, but doesn't it feel like they're not going to make it? Like I don't know. Like my predicting thing still hasn't making it, but I just feels like they're like the racehorse that got out in the beginning, and they're getting caught. Like they're still running fast, but it feels like Calgary is going to pick them up. And it feels like, and Calgary's not having a good year, but it just.
I'm not feeling Calgary yet. I'm not.
No,
I think the lack of
cross.
Yeah, I think
they're better than Seattle.
Well, I mean the fact
they may be, but they in the spot that they're in, I don't feel like they're doing it.
The fact that Seattle has basically had average goaltending all year.
Yeah.
I mean, Martin Jones' save percentage is sub 900.
Again,
I think
there's the East and West right there.
But the Hackstall system is better than the Sutter system. I can't believe I just said that, but
that is pretty something. Think about the difference between the East and Western Conference. That the team with Martin Jones is in the playoff race in the Western Conference.
But you got to give Hackstall credit here. Like Dave Hackstall had this same early effect on the Flyers, and then it frittered away. But he did and he's getting it again now in year 2 with them. I mean. He has to get credit here.
He was the perfect coach on in one level because, someone brought something in. I thought this was a really brilliant point. He's a college coach, right? He was a college coach forever. And what he basically had with the expansion team there was a college team, a bunch of freshmen all coming in at the same time.
Yeah.
They're all on a new team, a new group of guys all coming together, no predestined things. So that was really a college team. Like, not like, college level, but like the concept
now,
of like.
If you asked me, would they make the playoffs with Matty Beniers, I would tell you no. They would.
Yeah,
I do think he's had that big of an impact.
Yes, no, he has. He's definitely. They need that. I mean, they need something, right? You need to have that. Like Vegas had that. In a couple of players, right? They had, but this is like, it just doesn't feel like it. I guess the last thing I wanted to bring up about my initial topic, which I think is worth debating as well about this, just because I wanted to bring it back for a second, is we have everyone on here is obviously too young. We're just old people, but. Everyone's watching this is probably too young to remember what the impact is that Gretzky had going to LA. All right, which was a time at which like that changed everything in the NHL, right, Kevin? I mean, really, it changed. Looking back on it, it was an unbelievable thing.
Yeah, no, it was big. The best way I can describe it is in my 30-some years, I had 2 front page 1A stories, and one of them was Wayne Gretzky being traded to the LA, and of course, the hockey was not on anybody's radar in that time in the 1990s. So, it was just big. And I remember doing a story about talking to people in the advertising world about the impact that would be on, and they correctly predicted that Gretzky would start to appear. And I remember one of the quotes was from an advertising guy. He said, there are many people in this country that can't name 3 NHL teams, but they know Wayne Gretzky is the best player.
Right.
It was the uniqueness of his name and how much better he was. I mean, everybody sort of, even if you weren't a hockey fan, you knew that he was kind of Michael Jordan-esque.
Right. So that's the key too, right, Kev? Because they had Marcel Dion, they had great players.
Right.
There have been great players before in LA, but he was the one. Like he was the guy.
And Soprano is right on about that. Yeah. The existence of the West Coast corridor would not have been there. And, Wayne Gretzky spawned the creation of the hockey system out in California. We're starting to take players out of there. Yeah. It had a tremendous impact. And it really spurred on a greater advertising for the league. It used to be, when I first started covering the league, like, nobody wanted to be associated with the NHL because they were associated with fighting. And then when Gretzky came to LA, all of a sudden it seemed cool. The Hollywood set was into it. There were a lot of big celebrities coming to the games. It was a cool thing. It was the in thing to do in LA.
Now we'll never see that kind of growth again because we have grown enough. Like we've grown, like we have enough that is everywhere in the country. But like, so someone asked me if Crosby was say traded to Arizona tomorrow, like what would that be? What would that mean if that happened? Like at this point in time, now, Crosby's a little older in his career.
I'm going to tell you something. I'm not even sure that would save them. Sorry.
I don't know, but
that would mean he'd hire a Ryder truck to move to Houston in a year.
Yeah, I'm not even sure Matthews to Arizona would.
I think Matthews would have a bigger impact.
Would have a big impact
because he's a hometown kid.
Yeah,
hometown kid. Yeah, but
Arizona, would that save them, Kevin?
I think it could because I would assume his grandparents live in Mexico. And I think the Hispanic community would be more engaged, perhaps. Although Matthews doesn't speak Spanish, as I recall.
Yeah, I think a little,
but not much. Yeah,
not much. No.
But his mom was obviously born in Mexico, and so. I mean, I think it could help, but if you guys want to say it might not help, I can't dispute that.
So, is there any player we can trade to any city that would be anywhere near Gretzky to LA?
No,
I don't think so. And because it was the circumstances too,
even to the Panthers.
It was a 21-team league.
Yeah, and it was also moving from Canada to the U.S. and you had to, in order for that to be as impactful as it was, you have to be pretty low. I mean, the NHL was pretty low on the visibility.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, I do agree with
we don't have that. There's nothing out there like that.
Yeah, Disney is not making a Mighty Ducks movie if Wayne Gretzky isn't in LA.
Yeah,
but that really didn't work. I mean,
no, it didn't. But I'm just saying they wouldn't have even thought of it. I mean,
there were 5 Mighty Ducks movies, guys. They did work.
Oh, listen,
the Ducks movie worked, but it didn't stick with the NHL.
Yeah.
Disney sold the team. And,
that's true. Right.
I mean, because originally you were thinking like, wow, this is really going to have a lasting impact. Yeah. Disney will be associated with the league forever. And didn't
you
work.
Watch all 5 of them? Really?
Sure. I've seen all 5 of them. Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I'm going to get Pete Weber on your case.
They're definitely not. They're not great.
Copies of Slapshot all over it. At least that's a good.
Did you watch the series?
I have. I watched the series. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the series too.
Yeah, it felt Disney Channel.
Boy, it sounds great from the way you guys are explaining.
No, I'm not saying it was great, but it's something. I mean, it's hockey. It's mainstream hockey.
I'm going to go mark it on my Netflix now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Estevez is on there, so.
No, but for us, I mean,
he played a garbage man in the movie too.
But for Joe Schmo who's turning on television in the middle of wherever doesn't like hockey, it's a hockey thing on TV. So that it's like that is true. It does exist. It has more viewers than probably some NHL games. So when you look at it, it's just kind of like,
Yeah, I mean, as much as it feels like we've really grown in hockey, we still just don't measure up in terms of our television ratings, and I mean, they're improved, but like the number of people watching these basketball games, the NCAA, it's just nuts. Just absolutely.
That's what was interesting to me, Kevin, is like, would we have improved more compared to the other leagues without the internet and streaming? Like, would we really be like, because we've definitely improved viewership because of internet and streaming. But if that doesn't ever exist, if we're just back in our world where the only thing where you can watch things is on television over cable TV, does the NHL continue? Does the NHL make ground up more or less than they would? Because I think you could argue they would have made it ground a little bit more because they were hipper and more popular than other sports, but everybody who was hipper and popular, like hockey, was younger, and that they went right to the internet. So
yeah, I think it's less.
Yeah, me too.
The NHL did become like the tech favorite, and they were putting out good clips, video clips before a lot of leagues. They were ahead of a lot of leagues in that, and that did help their growth. Right. But I think if they would have just stayed in that same 4, we had the same channels. No.
Yeah, and now really, ESPN Plus, the NHL is the content, the main content for ESPN Plus. And, I mean, we know that with all the other networks out there like Paramount Plus and MGM Plus and all these pluses, that there is traffic and there is viewership out there to be fed into them, but it doesn't really allow the league to grow. It really doesn't. So
it really just allows the people who are fans to go watch.
Right, but they need to grow past the group of fans that are already fans to make the sport more.
Well, Kevin knows better than anybody on this one that you need to, in order to do that, in order to grow past the fans that make ordinary fans, you need a national story. A story that makes sense to everybody, or that everybody can get behind, like the Gretzky to LA type thing, or the Miracle on Ice.
Yeah, well,
those are the kind of things that otherwise you're not going to grow past that. I don't think
we've never really had, like the NBA. You got to give them credit for really celebrating their stars, and we've not really done that.
No, we haven't.
We've never really got out with that, and it kind of goes against the culture of our game.
It does.
We don't like
personality of those stars too. Like that's the other thing. Personality of the stars in the NHL and personality of the stars in the NBA. They're bigger.
Yeah. I mean, they're just they're more willing to talk. And I remember the one year when we had the lost season, I covered the NBA playoffs start to finish, and during the playoffs and obviously the dressing rooms have fewer players in them, so they had lazy boys set up in each cubicle, and the players would just plop down in them, and you'd go up and you'd chat with them, and there was no one that wasn't willing to gab with you. Like they sort of got it, that it was good for them, and they talk about each other, and they don't mind saying, oh, I'm better than him.
An example of what could happen. Because I did cover him before his rookie season, Luka Doncic at an event, and I saw that this guy was different even from regular NBA players because he was from Slovenia. If Slavkovsky could become like a 50-goal scorer, he's got a big personality, and he could change a lot of things in Montreal, but he's got to be successful. Like Doncic is one of the best players in the league. Slavkovsky would have to be that.
Yeah. I mean, in the NBA, there are probably 4 or 5 guys that you can just put their name in a headline and people will read the story.
Yeah.
And we don't really have anybody in the NHL, like not even Crosby a little bit, and Ovechkin a little bit. But I remember during the Stanley Cup final when the Capitals were in, I just couldn't get anybody to read off-day stories in the Stanley Cup final.
Although Crosby retires, all of Philadelphia will read it.
So yeah,
the biggest thing about that final, Kevin, was the way Ovechkin acted after he won the Stanley Cup. Like that was the big story. Remember?
Yeah, no, you're right. He got more coverage with the celebration because of the keg stands and the Phil Pritchard coming out saying that they've agreed not to do any more keg stands and like that. And that's true. I remember we got 100,000 plus reads on stories of with the photos accompanying them with doing
the video of him at the Nationals game, totally drunk. That was mad.
Yeah, absolutely.
That actually raised Ovechkin's star level quite a bit.
Well, but I mean, the problem with it is, one of the biggest stories in my last few years at USA Today was Brad Marchand licking somebody in the game, that a couple 100,000 readers,
Right.
So it isn't always a good thing that when you're.
Well, it's like Mike Tyson biting the ear of somebody.
Well, no, I mean, okay. Before and I don't think the NHL was on ESPN at that point. But when the Bertuzzi-Steve Moore thing happened, that was headline news on CNN and on Fox and on everywhere. Of course, the negative, the bad story. Is something that is always going to draw the most attention, just like
Sean Avery drew a lot of headlines. Especially
I forgot about that.
He drew. He's on a New York team.
Oh, Sloppy Seconds thing was like everywhere.
Yes.
Right, it's crazy.
Sloppy Seconds was on Saturday Night Live. It was
right. It did. It reached that kind of level, which is just it's hard for something in the NHL to do that. But that's the kind of stuff that we kind of need to like break through the other leagues.
But the point is, it seems that the stories that the NHL doesn't want to attract the attention, like Provorov or the Rangers or Reimer this weekend, that draws the attention. But the stuff that they want to have attention attracted to, like McDavid or Matthews.
That's true in every sport, though. I mean, the problem is we don't have the good stuff drawing attention too. Like the bad stuff will draw attention. I've sat here and listened to you guys talk about baseball scandals or football scandals all the time. It's like these things that's what happens, right? In every sport. But we don't have the really big, like the big good stories, Mike. Because like that's the thing. Like we don't have the opposite end of that to balance it out, like necessarily.
Yeah.
Our stories are more team motivated than they are individual motivated. We're a team sport through and through. And that's
the one thing too about, you're talking about ESPN Plus, I just looked it up. And I was actually surprised it's higher than I thought. How many people do you think subscribe to ESPN Plus?
Well, I know one does.
24 million. So higher than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But it's still, when you think we're a country of 340 million, it's not even.
But I bet you it was like 5 million before the NHL.
Well, you would think that, but I'm just looking this up too, and it said here that ESPN Plus games at the start of this year were getting 400 and some thousand views.
Yeah,
down from 600 and some thousand a year ago at this time.
I was going to say the you got to remember. Premier League soccer is on.
Is it on there last year?
F1, things like that, and those things drive.
ESPN Plus isn't just hockey, like we are.
No, but I'm telling you though, they didn't have a lot on before hockey like that people watch.
But I mean, that's really disappointing if those numbers are accurate. I mean, 400.
That would be disappointing.
Plus. Yeah, but
24 million.
I'm not usually in the position of complimenting ESPN for most anything, but I will say as a viewer, their presentation and being able to watch whatever broadcast you want of the game, like you can, if you're watching Leafs Sens, you can watch the Sens broadcast, you can watch the Leafs broadcast. I had NHL Game Center live, and you could not watch the particular broadcast. You were stuck with whatever one they provided to you. So it's much more flexible.
Premier League's on Peacock, Mike.
It's on Peacock? Okay.
But before we go, I wanted to give you this since we were talking about that. The probability algorithm from Money Puck has the odds of getting in the playoffs, which is what Eck and his wife figured out as well, because it's all based on math and so forth. But anyway, Seattle, according to this algorithm, has a 91.6% chance of getting in the playoffs right now.
That's good.
That's really high.
And the Buffalo Sabres are at 1.3%.
Right.
And the other one I found interesting, the race that we're most interested in, New York Islanders have grown from last time I looked, they were at 63%. They're at 65 now, 65.1.
What's Florida at?
Florida is at 67.4%.
That's because of their home record.
So both of those teams have a higher percentage of making the playoffs, and both won't make the playoffs.
The idea is.
Pittsburgh is below both of them, obviously.
Yeah, because they're on a losing streak. If they win a few in a row, it'll juggle again. But that home record thing with Florida, that's what they're going with on this, and that's the reason I thought they're going to make the playoffs too.
Yeah, I've been saying that for the whole time too.
The whole Calgary-Winnipeg thing, Winnipeg still has a 63.5% chance, and Calgary has a 40% chance. Now, again, this is all kind of.
If they win 5 in a row, if Calgary wins 5 in a row, it changes it a lot.
Well, it changes
yeah, for sure it is, because it's all based on your wins and everything else. But
I think right now, Seattle would finish with 91 points and Calgary would finish with 89. So that's not that big of a difference, right? So, and Nashville is still finished with 89 too, as well. So it's like they're right in there too. That depends on what happens.
The loser point really skews.
Yeah,
it really keeps the bad teams in it for a long time.
Yeah, which is a good thing. When people say, "Well, that's just so horrible," I think, "What's wrong?"
It's a good thing for fans of the league.
Yeah,
and rooting. It's a bad thing when you're trying to analyze after the season. Yeah.
It's a bad thing if your team's trying to get back into it, because that's the real problem. Like, that loser point kills you if you're coming from behind, right? Like if you're 3 or 4 points behind, the loser point's killing you.
You're chasing every time somebody ahead of you goes into overtime. It's
which is why I'm such a big believer in 3 points for a regulation win.
We had Tim Rosenthal at Boston, who covers the Bruins, on Off the Post on Sunday, and I asked him the question about who the Bruins would least like to play in the first round of the playoffs. I don't think they're scared of playing anybody, but obviously you have choices of who you would rather play. And he said the team that they would not want to play the Islanders or not want to play Florida, but weren't particularly scared of them playing Pittsburgh. And I found that interesting because with the championship pedigree that they have of Crosby and Malkin and Letang, but he's like, Jari is totally unreliable as their goaltender. And
he's
he thought,
unhinged,
yeah, and that's the big factor. I mean, you need a goaltender, especially in a 1 versus 8 type scenario, who's going to steal games. And we know Sorokin can, and we think Bobrovsky can. Yeah. I don't know if anybody believes Jari can.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, we're talking about Buffalo really needs a goaltender, and they have no one. And Boston has 2 guys. They've got Allmark, who's played really, really well, and now they got Swayman, who's got a shutout streak of 144 minutes. They've got 2 goalies playing well. So
Buffalo had one of those guys. They did.
Yeah, they did, but he didn't play that well when he was with them.
He didn't play that well, and he had injury problems in Buffalo. But it also is, as we were saying before about Buffalo, it's the team in front of them and how well they played defensively. And we know the Bruins are just a tight defense.
I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah, you need to help out these goaltenders. But I think I do think
something else I did say. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
As far as the Sabres go, they still need to keep drafting goalies, because they have this problem right now that still may not work out. They have to keep drafting goalies.
Yep.
That's the thing. Buffalo, unfortunately for Buffalo, like a team like Boston, they've been like the Rangers. They've known how to draft goalies for a long time, and the Rangers have too.
But Russ,
every 10 years, they've always seemed to have somebody.
But here's the point, Russ. If they draft goalies, they need to sign these goalies. They let Cal Peterson walk, and he, I know he's not right now. He's on the outs in Los Angeles, but up until this year, he was somebody he earned a $5 million a year contract. And Portillo, they drafted him. They had him for 4 years. He was at Michigan. They didn't sign him. He's going someplace else. If you draft these goalies, you need to sign these goalies.
Right? Oh, I think they wanted to sign Portillo.
They tried, and then he saw Levi and Luukkonen ahead of him, and that was it.
Yeah.
So. Well, that's about all the time. I do want to mention again, like the predicting thing had a crazy weekend. 28 and it was 28 and 9. When 28 wins correct, particularly 9 wins missed. 10 and 3 on Saturday night. Just like crazy stuff like that. It's just, I don't know. I'm riding it now, and my wife's like, we really should start putting money on this. I'm like, the second we put money on this, we will lose. So we're not putting any money on this at all. But I hope somebody out there is. I really do. I hope somebody is, because you're doing well if you are, because it's pretty crazy. It's pretty lucky right now. It's just, it's going to turn around. But we'll see. Anyway, remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will all talk to you tomorrow. It's only Monday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.